What if everything you believe about life after 60 is built on outdated science? What if the habits you trust, the foods, the routines, even the way you think about aging are actually hiding 6 rare traits that become more valuable than gold after 65? And here's the strange part. Most people don't even realize they already have the early pieces of these traits long before they retire. They just never knew how to recognize them. So, as you listen, keep an eye out for the moments that feel uncomfortably familiar, because those moments are clues. Clues to something bigger, something that rarely gets talked about in doctors' offices or wellness books. For decades, researchers believed aging was mostly decline, a slow and predictable slide downward. But in the early 2000s, things changed. Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn's work on telomeres, Dr. Dan Buettner's studies of long-lived populations, and the massive National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey (HANES) began uncovering patterns that didn't fit the old model. Patterns showing that some seniors aren't just surviving past 65. They're outperforming people 20 years younger. But here's the twist. These high-performing older adults aren't the ones with the perfect diets or the best genetics. They're the ones who developed a series of small, unlikely traits across their lifetime, traits that become priceless later. Traits almost no one notices until they're gone. To understand how these traits form, you have to go back much earlier than retirement. The origins begin in early adulthood, usually before age 30. This is where the first cause and effect chain snaps into place. According to long-term U.S. Census and HHS data, by their late 20s, nearly 68% of Americans say they're too busy to build new skills outside work. It sounds harmless, but that delay creates a pattern, one where the brain stops being challenged in meaningful ways. Over time, this shapes the first hidden trait, cognitive flexibility. Most people don't realize they've lost it until decades later, when they struggle to adapt to sudden changes, technology, health needs, financial surprises. The few who keep challenging their brain early develop a mental elasticity that protects them like armor after 65. Then something subtle starts happening in the 40s. It's quiet, almost invisible. According to the CDC, Americans at age 45 experience the first major decline in daily physical movement, dropping an average of 1,500 steps per day compared to their 30s. It's not dramatic, so nobody notices, but this is the decade when inflammation slowly rises, sleep quality sinks, and muscle mass begins to fade at about 1% per year. Hidden inside this decade is the second rare trait, metabolic adaptability, the body's ability to bounce back from stress, injury, or illness. Only a small percentage preserve it, often without realizing they're doing anything special. After 50, things shift again, but this time the changes hit harder. Most people assume it's just normal aging, so they shrug off the signs: lower energy, more stiffness in the morning, difficulty focusing, or a shorter fuse when life gets stressful. But this is the point where the third trait becomes critical: emotional steadiness. Not the kind that comes from being calm, but the kind that comes from having built strong internal coping systems over decades. According to American Psychological Association survey data, adults over 50 with this one trait have a 33% lower risk of chronic disease progression. Yet most seniors never heard about this link until much later in life. The breaking point usually arrives between 58 and 67. It looks different for everyone. For some, it's the sudden realization that climbing stairs is harder. For others, it's a doctor's warning about blood pressure, heart rhythm, or cognitive decline. For many, it's financial stress, medical bills, rising costs, or the shock of realizing retirement savings no longer stretch as far. This is where the fourth rare trait either saves people or leaves them vulnerable. That trait is behavioral consistency, the ability to stick to small daily actions long after the motivation fades. Research from Johns Hopkins shows that seniors who maintain consistent routines, walking, socializing, skill learning, reduce all-cause mortality by up to 22%. But the majority, overwhelmed by this breaking point, slip into survival mode instead. Then comes the fallout. Health falls into a pattern: more medications, less movement, shorter sleep, more doctor visits. Money becomes tighter, social networks shrink, and slowly, a dangerous belief forms: it's too late to change now. But this is where the fifth trait emerges: resourcefulness. It's rare because it develops in people who learned, earlier in life, how to improvise, solve problems, and adapt without waiting for perfect conditions. In U.S. aging studies, seniors with high resourcefulness are 41% more likely to maintain independence after 65, regardless of income or health status. They reinvent routines. They find new solutions. They stay in motion while others stall. The final rare trade-off and the most powerful appears the latest in life. It's purpose resilience, the ability to keep finding meaning, even when roles change, family dynamics shift, or old identities fade. Seniors with this trait don't just live longer, they live better. A study from the University of Michigan's Health and Retirement Survey found that adults over 65 with strong purpose resilience had a 43% lower risk of cognitive decline over the next 9 years. But most people never discover this trait because they rely on outdated advice. And that brings us to the failed fixes. Seniors are often told to just exercise more, eat better, or stay positive, but these generic tips ignore the root causes: lost adaptability, rigid habits, shrinking purpose, and inconsistent routines that began decades earlier. So people try solutions that don't stick: intense gym plans, strict diets, or supplements that promise miracles. The truth is simpler but deeper. The rare traits aren't about doing more, they're about rewiring the way you respond to aging. The few who master these traits become more valuable than gold, not only to themselves, but to their families, their communities, and their future. Now, if you're over 60, here are 3 direct actions you can take today. First, pick one skill you've never tried before and practice it for just 10 minutes. This reactivates cognitive flexibility. Second, establish one non-negotiable routine: walking, stretching, journaling, something so small you can't fail. This builds behavioral consistency. Third, connect with one person this week you haven't spoken to in a long time. Social novelty sparks emotional steadiness and purpose resilience more than most people realize. But here's the warning: doing all of this at once can backfire. Research shows that overwhelming the brain with too many new changes at once increases cortisol and dramatically reduces follow-through. Start with only one change per week. Let your system adapt. And before you go, here's an open thought to sit with. If 6 hidden traits could quietly shape your entire future after 65, what else might be unfolding inside you right now that you haven't recognized yet? The next video will uncover that part. If you want to follow the next chapter and learn how to build these rare traits step by step, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.